Good Saturday morning to you, and welcome to On the Mark. Along with Mark Papa, I'm Gary Byron. Mark is from Financial Resources Group out of Glastonbury. You can find them online at www.frplan. That's F as in Frank, R as in Richard, frplan.com. While you're on the website, by the way, there's a link that'll take you to YouTube. And you can get not only a replay of this show, but all of the other shows that we have broadcasted, or they're all recorded, so you can pull them up at your convenience. So when you go to YouTube, simply type in Mark Papa, that's MarkPappa, 5207, and then you'll pull up his YouTube channel. And of course, the phone number, listen, all this information is great, and you can sometimes get inundated and overwhelmed with it. And if you want to find out how that pertains to you, specifically your situation, give Mark a call. He'll sit down and meet with you. There's no obligation. A matter of fact, it'll open your eyes. He'll have this checklist for you. It'll be fun. And matter of fact, even if you have another financial advisor, sit down. You have nothing to lose here. Sit down. He'll open up your eyes to things that could actually end up saving you money. That phone number is 860-657-8380. And I'll repeat those points of contact really all throughout the show. Mark, good morning. It's great to see you.
Good morning, Gary. Welcome. Well, I'm glad to be back again. Another Saturday. It's seemed like just yesterday we were doing our first episode, and here we are. I mean, we are cruising right along here.
It's been almost 2 months. How was your week?
Oh, it's good.
You know, we're heading into April next week. I believe it's Tuesday, is April 1st. Because you're also an accountant, right?
Not an accountant, but
you're a tax advisor.
Yes.
Okay, so
tax savings, tax planning, and tax preparation.
Okay, so let's just for a brief moment, because I know we got a plethora of things to do. You gave a great teaser last week. I remember we were talking bonds, and there's a couple of things I want to touch on. But before I do that, what advice do you have to somebody who maybe, as we start inching our way into April and get encroaching on April 15th, what advice would you give to somebody who has yet to make an appointment? Is it too late? I mean, on the calendar, it's not too late because they don't have to be filed until April 15th, but is it too late to even schedule that consultation, schedule that meeting yet?
Well, I could say my schedule is super tight. And
that's what I'm asking.
And it's hard, but I don't discourage anyone from calling in. I mean, I know a lot of people get these things called K1s, from partnerships or trusts, and those things take a while to prepare, so they're probably not getting those on time. A lot of people have to file an extension. So basically, don't be afraid of filing an extension, but when you do, make an estimated payment.
Because you get penalized, right, with an extension.
Yeah, you're going to get penalized with interest. Take a look at your prior year's tax return, maybe look at some of your estimateds. But yeah, if you feel like you're going to owe money or you always owe money, make sure you just do it with an estimated payment to avoid paying additional interest to the IRS.
Okay, good advice.
That's all.
A couple of house cleaning that I want to kind of get to before we get into the topic of today, which is it's a really interesting topic. We're going to be talking about investment weighting in just one moment. However, you're giving out a free $100 gift card. Mm-hmm. Well, number one, what's this gift card to? Number two, and probably more importantly, how do I qualify for it?
Yeah, again, simple terms and conditions. We would want to do an intro meeting with you. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to bring anything to the first meeting. Just bring yourself and your questions. And at that first, it's what we call our goals meeting. And we go through and we figure out what your goals are. And you can ask whatever questions you need to ask then. And if you want to learn more, then we have you come back with your copy of your tax return. We want to see a copy of your investment statements so that we could take a look at, looking for hidden and unnecessary fees, unnecessary taxes. One of the others, also the fine print in your statements. A lot of people don't ever read the fine print, but
of course not.
There's a company out there that I know has trillions of dollars, and a lot of people own individual stocks there. And it says in their fine print, and most people don't know this, but you have to tell them that you don't want your stock to short sellers. And a short seller is when somebody bets, borrow stock to bet against the stock that's going to go down. And a lot of people don't realize this. And then what happens is they'll get this tax form called cash in lieu. And cash in lieu would be the dividends that were supposed to be paid to them. on a stock that they own that was short. And this can get kind of ugly because what happens is if that's paying a decent dividend, when it's called cash in lieu, you actually don't get the qualified dividend rates. You pay ordinary income on it.
Okay.
Yeah. So people aren't even aware of this kind of stuff. These big firms are not advertising that. So you need somebody like me to go in and look at the fine print of those statements. So that's not the only reason. We're not just looking at, drool over your investments. We want to see what's in the fine print, see what's under the weeds, see what's costing you money, see what's hidden in unnecessary taxes. Also, your home insurance, you're going to bring a summary of your home and property casualty insurance. We did an episode on that, Gary, and what's happening to insurance rates these days. Is it going down or are they going way up?
That's a stupid question, Mark. I think everybody knows the answer to that. First, it's not even just going up; it's going way up. There are people who had their insurance go up, and they haven't filed a claim in years.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I just thought about this the other day. We saw a couple of weeks ago people were throwing Molotov cocktails at the Tesla dealership.
Can you believe that? How ridiculous is that?
And I'm saying to myself, but if I'm Tesla, I have insurance on those cars. I'm going to get my money. You're burning a car, right? But I'm going to get paid by the insurance company for destroying it.
Yeah.
But the other problem is now that what they're trying to do is anyone buying a Tesla is probably going to get higher insurance rates because these activists are hitting them with Molotov cocktails.
Well, are they just going to dealers, or are they going to individual owners?
They went to dealerships, but still, it's still it's just a horrible, terrible thing. Terrible people, and I'll say that I don't drive a Tesla, but terrible people. Anyway, not to get off track. So that's what we do for folks. We want to get in the weeds and take a look at your home insurance. Make sure you're not paying too much in taxes. Make sure you're not paying too much in fees. Make sure they're not hidden in unnecessary fees. We want to bring things to the surface for you. And that's what we do. And I'll tell you, every single time I've done one of these, there's no one who's walked away not only knowing more about themselves than they thought, but they're finding things that they were never shown or unaware of. And again, I mentioned that some of the people, don't need my help anymore, and then we fix the little things. And then some people do become clients because they just, by the end of that meeting, they could be, sometimes they're just disgusted with the person they've been working with for 20 years.
You do. You kind of do estate planning. You do, but you're not an attorney, and you're upfront about that. But you have so many contacts and links with to help people with this. Just take a moment and explain that.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody who comes on board with us as a client, we're going to actually get you for sure at least once a year. You're going to get an update of your power of attorney. And remember, last one of those episodes, I talked about the pitfalls of powers of attorney that banks and brokerage firms love to give people.
Right. I remember that.
They have all their own rules, so you can have a perfectly legal power of attorney. Doesn't work. I also brought up Social Security doesn't care about your power of attorney at all, right? And you have to actually go to this, and actually become appointed what's called representative payee. So we bring that to people's attention and show them how to get that done too. In the event that they have a parent or a family member who's incapacitated, you certainly don't want their Social Security check not to cash, okay? So those are the kind of things that we want to do. But yeah, so anyone who becomes a client has free access to that update power of attorney once a year. That, plus what we'll do is also, if they need to update their will or trust, this system is so powerful with AI and, it is a group of, it's owned by lawyers. They know what to do. In fact, they did a video for me by a woman in New York City because I had some questions about it, for my own stuff. And she was a estate litigation expert, not just a lawyer. She did estate litigation. So she knew where all the little pitfalls of estate planning are. And they went in, they're looking to constantly fill whatever little possible holes there are in the system to make sure that you don't run into any trouble. So you want to make sure you have your will up to date. You want to make sure your assets are titled correctly. You want to make sure you avoid probate at all costs. And those are the kind of things we'll help you do.
All right.
Scrub through everything.
I did say a moment ago that...
Another reason to bring your statements, by the way.
Yeah.
Looking at those titles. Because I've seen people with, I have a living trust. And then you look at it, it says, okay, Jim, Bob, and Jane Doe, joint ownership. I said, well, it's not your trust. Your trust doesn't own that. So you better get that fixed.
Right. One heck of a cliffhanger last week. We were talking about bonds, and I asked you an important question. I'm going to tease it. just for a moment, I'm going to let that stew and I'm going to go to something else. All right. And that was, you had said something last week that really resonated with me. And I think with a lot of other people too. We've always heard about for years growing up and you got to have your stocks and bonds. And well, what's the ratio? What percentage should be stocks? What should be bonds? And you said something like 40% people were doing 60% stocks and 40% bonds. And you're saying it should be even less than that. I asked you a question last week. Well, then what would you recommend for the percentage for it to be bonds? Before you get to that, okay, and when we talk about investment weighting, what is this stress test that you mentioned? I'm very intrigued with this.
Well, this is a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about, investment weighting. So it's called the retirement stress test. So we call it the 3 little pigs test, Gary, which is kind of funny. So if you score between a 1 and a 4, your house is made of straw. Mm-hmm. Okay. 5 to 8, your house is made of sticks.
Okay.
And 9 to 10, your house is made of bricks. Right.
Wow.
So,
okay.
3 little pigs test, right? So we want to make sure would your financial foundation survive the big bad wolf? So we have 10 questions here, and I'll just start off with just the first 3. I'm certain that my plan will protect my lifestyle regardless of stock market or interest rate conditions. Okay?
You hope.
Yeah, you hope. I've reviewed all available long-term care possibilities, including the no-cost options. I know that I'm paying the least amount of taxes legally possible. And I think
well, that's part of the job. When they sit down with you, that's what
most people will tell me, oh, absolutely. Until I get in there and dig in and say, well, you're not actually.
Exactly.
And I'm not, and then, so that's kind of fun. They just rely on their accountants, but the accountants don't have time to dig through the account. It's really the investment advisor. When you end up writing that check, it's the trading costs, the capital gains. It's usually the investment advisor who's causing those unnecessary fees and taxes, not the accountant. The accountant can only do so much. Our hands are tied. Once the 31st, the clock ticks to January 1st, once that ball drops on New Year's Eve, it's too late for you to make any changes. It's just too late. There's nothing we can do. Wow. The die has been cast. So we can try all sorts of different tricks, but you're basically robbing Peter to pay Paul at that point. Why don't we just do our best to keep that bill as low as possible? And then I feel that all the new techniques available to help me are explained by my financial institution each year. I have peace of mind that I will not outlive my money. Here's another one. I reviewed all the actually, I'm positive my power of attorney will work with Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits, and the IRS. And, so those are the kind of things we want to go through. So these are things we actually do for people, Gary. So, and we get them to buy into the idea. If I just sit back and bark orders at people, nothing's going to get done. But we get them to buy in. So what's the consequence of not doing these things? What would happen if I don't get my power of attorney up to date?
Right.
What happens if I don't check my will to make sure that the executor of my will is still even willing to do it?
How often should a person be checking this?
I'd say power of attorney once a year.
Okay.
I would say the will, I'd say every 3 to 5 years probably would be a good idea to do it.
That's what I was thinking.
And then we get a lot of questions, do I need a trust? So on our website under estate planning, it has a little quiz. Do you need a will or trust? And it'll tell you right then and there. If you're a good candidate for a trust, it'll tell you if you're a good candidate.
Well, give me
a
a sample. What would make a good candidate for a trust? If you've got family or?
I would say the couple areas that I won't touch with our system. Someone has a child with special needs, and they need some special, different provisions or some advanced planning. That's a lawyer's job. You need to talk to a lawyer, someone who's well versed in special needs, by the way, not just somebody who's you just don't go to the guy that did your closing for your house to do your estate planning. Sorry, guys, but unless of course there is a guy in Newington, he knows, if he's listening, he does wills, trusts, and he also does some real estate closing. So there are some people, but make sure they're also well versed in estate planning, and that they're elder law certified before you do it. And so I would say somebody also has out of state property may want to consider a living trust. And then there's a couple other things like maybe I have a child who's a spendthrift or. There's all sorts of different reasons, but I would say most people just need a simple will. They need to get their accounts titled correctly, and again, having a living trust isn't the end of the world either. If they want to avoid probate and make sure that they don't, can pass their money on to the beneficiaries in the way that they desire, then that's another way to go. It's a personal choice. All
right.
And the same thing for investment weighting.
Speaking of which, let's get into investment weighting.
Yep. So hopefully I wasn't too verbose on that.
Not at all. These were my questions. So.
Yeah. So those are the general things that we would recommend. So investment weighting, Gary, this is a really thing. So we talked about a really important thing. We talked about the 60-40 portfolio.
Yeah.
And you asked me, what should people do? Well, I'm not a one-size-fits-all guy, because imagine, if there was that one-size-fit-all suit, would that fit people custom, or would it just fit everybody kind of sloppily?
It's not going to fit. Of course not.
Not going to fit well, right?
No.
It's not going to look good. And
you should also, I was always brought up with the notion of you should never put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. And that's actually what we're going to talk about. Not this episode, the next couple episodes.
A diversified portfolio, if you will.
Yeah, and true diversification, not
right.
fake. Because there's a point where I'm going to come in with actual morning stars from live examples of sanitized examples, of course, of people's portfolios, that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And guess what? No matter, even though they might have 10 different funds, their eggs are all in the same basket. Yeah. But, that's
people got to meet with you. You got to meet with Mark.
Yeah. Thank you. So let's talk about investment weighting for a minute. And investment weighting is, what percentage of your money do you want to have at risk, and what percentage of your money do you want to have safe? It's really that simple. Okay.
Well, ideally, you want it all safe, but you're going to make the greatest gains with the higher risk. Lower risk, you'll make money, but it'll be more minimal.
Exactly. So if you're a high risk and you're high risk and you're somebody who is just interested in making lots of money and doing lots of trading and those type of things, you're aggressive.
There are people who don't have the time. They can't watch the stock market all day long. They got a job. They got a career.
Exactly. So what we do is we sit folks down and we take their statements, we put them in Morningstar, and we find out what percentage of your money is safe, what percentage of your money is risk. So in simple terms, it's called areas of concern current investment weighting. And then what we'll do is we'll show you have this much in principal preservation, which is a fancy smancy term for safe, and you have this much in market sensitive, which is a fancy smancy term for risk. Okay? And what we do is we go through this really cool exercise, Gary, where I'll say to them, so and I draw a bell curve. Do you remember the bell curve from fifth grade?
Oh, of course.
The bell curve, the statistics and all that fun stuff. And we make a bell curve. And I'll say, okay, so if I were to run a race of 65-year-olds, okay, and run a race, what we'll do is we're going to say 5% of the people are going to finish at the very top, okay? The other 5% are going to finish at the back. That's where I finish in the race because I hate running. But where does most people finish?
Somewhere in the middle of the pack.
Exactly. They're going to finish somewhere in the middle of the pack. And go ahead.
Can I just do a quick ID?
Yeah.
Really fast? Or do you want to finish that?
No, go.
Folks, you are listening to On the Mark with Mark Papa. I'm Gary Byron. And of course, you can get more information on what his company, the company he works for, Financial Resources Group. They're out of Glastonbury. You can find them online at www.frplan.com. There's a link, by the way, to YouTube because he's got his own YouTube channel there. So I'll give you more details on that in a moment. And the phone number, 860-657-8380. And by the way, if you just missed it because I spoke too fast, no worries. I'm going to mention it again more towards the end of the show. Mark, I apologize. Please continue.
Oh, yes. Okay, so Gary, so we'll say, most people are going to finish that race in the middle, right? And the same goes for their investment weighting, their investment risk tolerance, right? They're going to say, okay, so let's say, for example, just like the race, in the bell curve, 5% of the people, okay, are aggressive investors, and they're going to take their Social Security check and they're going to run down to the casino. They're super aggressive, okay?
Not too smart. But.
Yeah, and then on the other end of the bell curve, on the short end, the low risk end, those are people who bury their money in the backyard. They put it in cans and they're super stick in the mud conservative, okay? Where do you think most people will become in somewhere?
Well, I think more people are going to be conservative with their money. Fiscal conservatives.
Yeah, most people are going to be more conservative with their funds, but based on risk reward, most people who put their money in the stock market, where do you think most people fall? Just like the race,
Right in the middle. Right in the middle.
Yeah. And what we normally find out when we do this exercise, then we'll turn around and say, okay, so where do you fall on the bell? What do you think? And some people, usually the husband will say, oh, I'm a 60. And the spouse will say, well, I'm probably more of a 50. Or sometimes the spouse, the female, is actually more well-versed than the husband because she's running the money. She's the CFO of the house. And she'll be like, no, I want to be a 65. And the husband's like, well, honey, maybe we should be a 50. So what we do is we get them to come to an agreement. So if we were to compromise, where do you want to be? And they go, well, he's 60, I'm 41. Is 50 okay or is 55 okay? And I said, is that okay with both of you? We're not going to get a divorce over this? And they're like, laugh and like, no. He just goes, you know what? Why don't we just meet like 55? How's that? And I'm like, perfect. And I save it for their next meeting. And in that next meeting, I take that 55 and we do a solutions meeting and I show them how to get that 55. Now, here's another thing I do before I even get to that point, though, is we talk to folks about this formula that was created by University of Chicago and NYU. So those are, low-end institutions are pretty high-end institutions, New York University and University of Chicago. They top 20 schools or bottom 20 schools, right? Mm-hmm. They're top 20. These are the smartest, sharpest pens in the drawer. And so what they did was they couldn't figure out what number should people, because you asked me the question, what number should I use to determine how much risk I should take? And that I could do a whole other episode that flips even this on its head. Like the older you get, right? The more conservative you should be.
They say.
Right? You shouldn't be buying green bananas at that stage and be safe because you don't have time to recover. But that's a whole other episode I'm going to be talking to you about later on. But I say for most people, Gary, what you'll do is you'll take your age. If you're aggressive, you're going to subtract your age by 120. So if I'm 120 minus age 65, that means I put 55% of my money I'm willing to risk, okay, or put in the market, and then 45 will be safe, okay? Mm-hmm. And then we say, well, if I'm a moderate investor, I have my age minus, I'll use 110 as the example, right? And it'll be age minus 110. That'll be 45 in risk and 55 in safe. Okay. Now, if I'm really stick in the mud conservative and I hate losing money and I can't stand it, then I'm going to take my age, subtract my age from 100. That would be 35% in stocks and 65% in safe. Okay. And then they'll tell me where they want to be. So let's just say someone says they want to be aggressive. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'll say, no problem. That's 55%. And you agree to this number. And they're like, yeah, you're comfortable with that? Yeah, that's what I want to do. Okay. And so what they do at that point, I show them what they actually have. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, remember, I talked about stocks and bonds 60-40. Okay. Now, remember what I said about bonds. How much did those 30-year treasuries lose and how much can bonds lose with a high interest rate? Remember I talked about it was somewhere about 30%.
Right.
Yeah. So, I show them an example of, with a 1% interest rate move, this is what it does. With a 2% interest rate move, this is what it does. And we go through this little exercise. Now that you know that bonds are not safe, can bonds be considered principal protected or guaranteed assets if you know that they could lose money? No. So what we do is now we show them, okay, well, you have some cash sitting here. You have a bank CD. You have about $100,000 in there between checking and savings. But your $1 million portfolio is exposed to what? Both stocks and bonds. If stocks can lose and bonds can lose, is that safe money?
No.
No. So then I'll say, okay, but Mr. Jones and Mrs. Jones, you show me here you want to be 55% at risk and the difference in safe. Guess what I'll say? I'll say, well, if that's the case, you have 90% of your money at risk, but you only want how much again? Well, 55%. Yeah, so that means 35% of your money that you don't have safe is at risk.
Wow.
How does that feel?
Ooh.
And they'll tell me, Mark, we had no idea. And I said, oh, did you tell your advisor you wanted to be super aggressive? Or did you say you wanted to be more moderate or more? No. We told them we wanted to be somewhere, 60-40, 50-40, And they'll say, well, why are you 90% at risk? And they'll say, well, we're not really sure. And I said, well, what could be a couple reasons why you're taking on more risk than you thought you were? And they're like, well, maybe our guy just doesn't know. And I'll say, well, whose job is it to know, yours or your advisor's?
Your advisor.
And I'll say, well, how does your advisor get paid? And then most of them will say, oh, I think he gets a fee. They don't even know how much the fee is half the time, but the guy gets paid a fee. And I said, so if he's more risky, that means now you hear these terms, well, we do better when you do better.
Yeah.
All right. So when you're taking on more risk and the markets are hot, guess who's doing better? Not just you, but who else?
Yeah, the advisor.
The advisor. So the advisor getting paid more, so he's taking on more risk than you asked for, so he can make what?
More money.
More money. And they're like, oh, okay. And by this point in the meeting, Gary, they've already pretty much, I think their advisor is, the toast is getting darker and darker and darker as we go through this. And eventually the toast is burnt and they're moving on. Okay. But those are the exercises that we'd love to work with folks on. Let's make sure that if you say that you want your money to be safe, that it actually is safe. And if you want your money at risk, let's make sure the money's appropriately risky. And doing the right thing, and it'll stand the test of time. And come on in and let's get your $100 gift card going. Let's get this 3 Little Pigs test done. Let's do my introduction meeting, so we can really find out what your goals are, not my goals. I can't, and my hands are tied unless I know, right, what your goals are. So we're going to help you discover those goals, bring you down the path of discovery to help you help yourself.
Incredible! Wow. They're not even looking out for their client. They're just lining their pockets.
And don't. I would say in these cases where it looks like this, it happens a lot. It doesn't happen all the time. There are a lot of good advisors out there. Don't get me wrong. But let's put your guy to the test. Let's put that advisor.
We don't
to
know
the
that
test.
until you come in and take and do the test with you.
Look, I'm in business to compete too. So I'm not here to compete unfairly.
Right. It's just disheartening to hear that, I guess, is what I'm saying.
It's unfortunate. It does happen. Sometimes it's just lack of attention. Other times, though, there's a lot of good advisors out there, so I'm not bashing my industry. There's a lot of guys I look up to in my business, right in my town, who I share data with. I'm free to,
Yeah, but people don't know what they don't know.
No.
And you may open up their eyes to something, and you may catch something, and there's no, on their behalf, there's no obligation. They're in a win-win scenario when they sit down with you. They don't have to, sign with you necessarily, but you're teaching them. You're showing them.
I'm helping them come to their own conclusions. And if I'm doing my job,
folks,
they're going to be helped.
If you'd like more information on this episode or others, please head to the website for Financial Resources Group. It's frplan.com. And by the way, they got their own YouTube channel, so you can click on the link right on their website. It's just when you get to the search field on YouTube, type in Mark Papa, MarkPappa 5207. And as far as the phone number to sit down and schedule something with them, 860-657-8380. 860-657-8380. For Mark Papa, I'm Gary Byron. Thank you so much for listening to On the Mark. Until next weekend, have a good one, everybody. So long.